Om Shri Ganesha Gurubhyo Namaha. In one of our earlier episodes of the Guru Tattva series, we spoke about the teachings of Lord Dattatreya. Lord Dattatreya is called as an Avinashi avatar, that is, an eternal incarnation or an incarnation which has no end. The subsequent incarnations of Lord Dattatreya periodically came only for the spiritual upliftment of mankind. Lord Dattatreya is also called as a Smaranagami or a Smartragami avatar. That is, if a devotee calls out to him for help in despair or out of devotional ecstasy, he appears before the devotee instantly in any form. For those who are spiritual seekers and followers of the Datta Sampradaya, the Guru Charitra is considered to be a very sacred text. The Guru Charitra is a compilation of 51 chapters and is mainly a conversation between a master, Siddha Muni, and his disciple, Namadharak. Siddha Muni has a special mention here because he has been a very close disciple of Sri Guru Narasimha Saraswati and has been a direct witness to so many events and incidences in Narasimha Saraswati's life. He narrates these incidences to the disciple Namadharak. Now, Namadharak means namesake or one who extols the name of the Guru. So it could be you and me also. So let's imagine Namadharak is us and we are posing certain questions to Siddha Muni and he gives us a narration of events and answers to our queries. The entire conversation between Siddha Muni and Namadharak has been compiled in a written form by Saraswati Gangadhar. Saraswati Gangadhar is a fifth generation, the lineage of Sayamdev Sakhare, who was also a very close disciple of Sri Guru Narasimha Saraswati. The only difference was that he was a householder, whereas Siddha Muni was a brahmachari or a sannyasi. The Sakhare family had a special grace of the Guru, and that is why Saraswati Gangadhar has this unique honor of writing the Guru Charitra, the biography of the Gurus. The Guru Charitra was considered a sacred text then, and even now there have been certain inputs from various other experiences and incidences also. But it mainly talks about the moral code of conduct, the religious order of the day. I'm talking about the system prevalent at that time. It was found that people had strayed away from their original religious dimension and were influenced by social, cultural, historical events to such an extent that many people even diverted from the religious fold. To bring back those people on the religious path again, Guru Narasimha Saraswati and the earlier incarnation Guru Sripada Sri Vallabha, these two gurus saw to it that people started slowly coming back to their fold, and they gave them a code of conduct, they gave them a moral code, they gave them a certain format due to which they could follow and they could lead a life of discipline, and a civilized society could have been said to be generated. The most important thing about the incidences or stories of Guru Charitra are, many people talk about it, they are the miracles. But the miracles which were shown here were not to have a few magic tricks. These miracles were done by these gurus only to instill a certain awakening in the disciple. So if you see a sequence, it's like this, that a miracle is supposed to awaken a questing mind in the person, and that slowly goes on to become an awakening of the soul, which leads on, of course, to realizing the absolute mission of man, that is to find out his true self. As even Ramakrishna Paramhans has said, that the main mission of man is to realize God. But because of the various influences around him, he forgets his mission and gets strayed. And that's not a good sign. So coming back to our Guru Charitra, the Gurus have always told us here that miracles are done not to create a certain marketing value for the particular fold, but miracles are supposed to awaken the soul in you. So that was the reason. Now, talking of one particular instance which is mentioned in chapters 30, 31 and 32. This instance is of great importance because, again, if you look at it on the face of it, it seems to be a miracle. but there is a deeper message the Guru has for us. Now, this incident is very important. Let's see what it is all about. There lived in Mahur, somewhere in the central Maharashtra, a very devout couple, and uh, they were very pious, they were very religious, and they were devotees of Lord Dattatreya. They had only one thing that they were really grieved about, and that was they had no children. The children that were born to them would die within a very short span of time. So ultimately, they took their plea to Lord Dattatreya and prayed to him to give them only one son, but he should live long. Lord Dattatreya was pleased with their devotion, and they were blessed with a male child, and they named him Datta after Lord Dattatreya's grace on him. This young boy, Datta, grew, and by the time he was 12 or 14, they arranged that he should be married, and they arranged a marriage for him with a girl called Savitri, who was also the only daughter of her parents. The two lived happily in the in-laws' house, that is the parents' house of the boy. Savitri was also equally devout, religious. She was also fine. She was very much loved by her in-laws. She was very much loved by her husband. Years passed, both of them turned 16. They got married at the same age, and they both were at the same age, 16, when something happened very seriously. That was, the boy Datta was struck with a very strange disease. At that time, it was a very unknown and very grave disease. Today, it is very curable, that is tuberculosis. As they did not know what to do, this boy was taken to various doctors and hakims and vaidyas, and nothing happened. Nothing could help this boy come out of the situation. In fact, the entire happiness of the family had completely withered. The girl also gave up on, although she was a young girl, she gave up on all her the things, the cravings that a young girl has for. She gave up on all that. She stopped dressing up very well, and she was only all the time thinking about her husband and his welfare. She served him very dutifully. No doctor or hakim or vaidya could give any solution to the boy's his condition worsened. Someone in the village ultimately came up with a solution that they should go to Gangapur, which is on the border of Maharashtra and Karnataka. And at Gangapur, they said there is a very devout soul, the Guru Narsimha Saraswati. He sits on the place called as a Sangam. Sangam is the confluence of the rivers Bhima and Amarja. He generally sits there for meditation, but he is in Gangapur, and Gangapur is blessed to have a soul like him. The girl wanted to leave no stone unturned. She said, okay, we plan a trip over there. We go on a pilgrimage to Gangapur, and we also take Guru's darshan, and he will give us a solution for the well-being of my husband. She appealed to her in-laws and said that she would take her husband. They arranged a cart for her. As they were aged, they did not accompany the couple. The young couple left. And just as they reached the outskirts of Gangapur, she halted the bullock cart. She told her husband to wait for a few minutes till she went and found out the whereabouts of the Guru. As she went in, so she was told by someone that the Guru was sitting, that is Narsimha Saraswati, was sitting at the banks of the Sangam. She hurried back to the bullock cart to see her husband, and when she saw, what she saw rather was shocking. Her husband had died or passed away. She could not believe that after coming to the outskirts of Gangapur to get the grace of the Guru, something like this could happen. She lost her husband. What was worrying her even more was, what would she answer her in-laws? He was the only son. What would she tell them? She had given them full confidence that yes, I will get him back fully cured from his disease. Now she had no face to show. She was so shocked by the whole thing that she lamented and grieved and cried, and she blamed the Guru for her condition. She blamed Lord Dattatreya also. People gathered around her. Some of them sympathized with her. Some of them directed her to go to the Sangam. Some of them said that now the last rites for the husband's body had to be performed. It was getting a little late. As she was lamenting, a yogi appeared in front of her. He gave her a lot of confidence, and he also told her that death is inevitable. That which is born has to die. Even if it was Rana who lived for 6 crore years, ultimately at the end of 6 crore years, he had to die. Whether it was Parikshit who had to die. So everyone who is born ultimately has to die. And he also explained to her that whatever relations you call as your in-laws, your parents, your husband, these are all of this birth. Did you know who were your in-laws, your parents, your husband or wife or spouse or daughter in your earlier birth? Or do you know what is going to be the future in the next birth? What are you going to be born as? When you have no idea about all this, what is the point in lamenting? So he gives her confidence. He says, just give up this grief, carry on with your funeral rites, but before that, listen to my instructions. The young girl Savitri is really grieved, but she somehow has some faith. She feels this yogi is like a parent to her. In fact, he's a substitute for her parents. She has no one over there in the new place that she has come to, and she finds a ray of hope through this yogi who seems to instill confidence in her. She bows to him and she asks him what should be her life now. She says she does not want to live anymore, and at that time in society, sati was very prevalent. Sati is where the wife joins her dead husband on the funeral pyre and gets herself completely burned to ashes. Though this was a very, it's a very heinous thing, but still, sati at those times was considered much better than living the life of a widow. So she takes his permission and she says, I would like to go sati on my husband's funeral pyre. The yogi says, okay, now listen to my instructions, he says. He gives her 4 rudraksha. And he says, 2 you tie to the ears of your husband and 2 you tie to your Mangal Sutra. That is what she has as a sacred, you can say, necklace which her husband has given her as a sign of their marriage. He then tells her, collect the priests of the locality, that is of Gangapur, and ask them to recite a Maharudra Abhishek. And thirdly, he says, don't forget that before you enter the pyre with your husband's body, please go and take the blessings and the grace of Guru Narsingha Saraswati at Sangam. The girl bows to him, agrees to all what he says, and sets out on her mission. As she is well-to-do, she has got a lot of money also with her. She arranges for the priest to have the Maharudra Abhishek. She buys lots of, you can say, auspicious things which a married woman generally has. She buys things from there. She arranges it to be donated to the ladies who are there, who are married ladies. She donates it to them. She takes the Rudraksha. She ties 2 to her husband's ears, 2 to her own Mangal Sutra. And she is, though she is doing all this physically, mentally she is still grieving the fact that what is she going to talk to her in-laws? What is she going to tell them? So she tells the people who are there that even if you happen to go back to my place at Mahur, that is in central Maharashtra, do not tell my in-laws that I have lost my husband or that their son is dead, because then I will be responsible for 3 deaths, 2 in-laws and 1 of my husband. Tell them that we have settled here at Gangapur with the Guru. Don't tell them that I am also going sati with him. She appeals to the people. She prostrates in front of all of them. But she is muttering constantly to herself, what have I done in life to get this fate at such a young age, when I should be having a glorious life of a married woman, and maybe in the next few years I would be mother of some children. Here I am lamenting over the body of my young husband. She is really very sad and she keeps muttering the same things again and again to herself. She curses her fate, she laments over her fate. And as she does all this, she says, okay, now everything is ready. Now, as she's just about to climb on the mount on the funeral pyre, she remembers the 3rd instruction. She pauses. This pause is important. She pauses and she says, there's something I have missed out. Then it strikes her that she has to go and take the grace of the Guru before she enters the pyre. She appeals to the priests who are sitting there that please don't carry on the rites till I come. I'll be back in just a few minutes. I'm going running, taking the blessings of the Guru and coming back. She runs all the way from where this is to the Sangam, which is quite a distance. And she goes running throughout the route. Her mind is only having the same thoughts again and again. The moment she sees a Guru at the Sangam, she feels an inward peace, a solitude in her. She goes and prostrates in front of him. He blesses her and says, "May you always remain a married woman." She's a little taken aback. What is this blessing the Guru is giving? So maybe she has heard wrong. So she again prostrates in front of the Guru. He blesses her this time that you will be blessed with many good, righteous children. This again shocks her the second time. In the meantime, there are some people around there who have known the sequence of events. So one of them folds his hands and tells the Guru very humbly, very modestly, that Swami, she has just lost her husband. She's come to take your blessings because she's entering sati with her husband. The Guru smiles and says, "It is not possible at all. I can see from her face she has got the signs of a married woman and she is going to be blessed with very virtuous children." He says, "Go bring that body in front of me." So some people rush to the place where the body has been kept on the pyre. They bring the body from there and they bring it near the Sangam where Guru is sitting. He looks at the body and he says, "Oh, the breath which has gone in has forgotten to come out." See, the words are important here. He says the breath which has gone in has forgotten to come out. From this we come to know our life and death, the distance between them is just a breath. So he takes some water, holy water of his own feet, and he tells one of the priest over there to sprinkle it on the body. The priest sprinkles it on the body. It is Charan Tirtha, the holy water of the Guru's feet. So obviously the dead man is revived. And he gets up and he looks wonderstruck around. He's ashamed because he is not in a position where he can stand in front of 4 people. And here he scratches his head and he asks his wife, "Where am I? What am I doing here? And what are you doing? Where have you brought me? Why are so many people?" He has lots of questions to ask. But his wife, young wife, is so overjoyed at seeing her husband alive that she really doesn't know what words to use. She narrates to him in short what exactly had happened, and both of them go take a dip in the Sangam, that is the confluence of Bhima and Amarja river, and they come back to the Sangam, fall at the Guru's feet and thank him profusely for his blessings. Now, even though this has been a happily ever after story for most of us, the main thing is, what lesson does the Guru want us to know from here? If you go back a little to what I have narrated, I talked about a pause. A pause is not a full stop. It's a waiting point. So many times in life we are struck with situations where we feel it's too much, I can't handle it anymore. So when we come into that zone of life where we say, I can't handle it anymore, some people are very weak. So they immediately resort to something which is very serious, severe. For example, some of them may think of even ending their lives, committing suicide. This is cowardice. Because here the message is pause before you take any action of harming yourself. Think of the harm it's going to do to others who you leave behind. Think of the calamities which are going to fall after one passes away from this world. So any impulsive decision is going to land in a mess. So here a pause is important. See, the girl paused for a minute. She realized that she had forgotten a most important instruction of the yogi, and that was to take the grace and blessings of Guru Narasimha Saraswati. And because of that pause, when she went back and she came, you can see, overjoyed that her husband was alive. In the same way, when we have certain distressed situations in life, situations which make us feel like it's really difficult to handle it anymore, we need to take a pause. Even if you have seen a lion, walks a few steps, pauses, turns around and has a survey of what it has left behind. That's called Simhavalokan. In life, we need to do the same. We need to have a glance at what has happened in the past. So many things we have crossed and come over to whatever state we are in today. So today also we will cross over and go to the future. So nothing is going to be permanent, be it sadness, be it happiness, be it any distressful state, be it disappointment, or be it depressive state also. Is going to pass. This is what is the message the Guru gives us. Here, miracle of bringing the dead man alive is a story. It is a fact. And they had those powers. Now, discussion about those powers we will come to a little later, maybe in some other episode. But here the message the Guru wants to tell us is a pause in life is important when your mind is confused, when your mind is in distress, when you have so many thoughts crisscrossing each other and creating a real traffic jam into your head. You need to pause, you need to wait and then clear out that jam, and then you see how life goes on very smoothly further. This is the message of the Guru. But unfortunately, many of us don't read this hidden message. We look at the miracle, either we clap hands at the miracle, or some of them, those who do not believe in certain religious scriptures or the text, they may even make fun or poke fun at these miracles. They may say, this is something which any magician can do. What's so great about it? Or this is just a story. Who knows what is the truth or the evidence of it? That is why I said this is an incident which has been narrated by Siddha Muni, who was a witness to this event. He narrates it to Namadharak, that is us. And this is compiled in the Guru Charitra by Saraswati Gangadhar. So as what? We all got the message that in life, don't be in a rush to do anything. Have a pause. Try to sort out your things, sort out life and live life happily. That's what the Gurus want you to do. And remember the message of a miracle. The miracle is supposed to create a certain questing mind in a person. It could be anyone. It could be a seeker. It could be a non-seeker. A person who's a rationalist. A person who says, I am very logical in thinking. Whatever it is, a miracle is supposed to raise a question in your mind. And from that question, it awakens the spiritual soul in you. So the message of the Guru should be taken in this way, that let's transform ourselves from human being, the animal, to human being, the divine self. Om Shri Ganesha Gurubhyo Namaha.